Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. This is Britt from Handshake. Welcome to today's Virtual Affairs Spring Kickoff webinar. We're excited to have you here. We're going to get started in just a minute, but as per usual, we want to make sure everything's working okay. So if you can see the screen, the title slide that says Virtual Affairs Spring Kickoff, and if you can hear the dulcet tones of my voice, if you could just jump into the chat and give us a quick hello, that would be wonderful. Again, just want to make sure everything's working before we get started, and also get a little bit of excitement and hellos going. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to jump back on mute. We'll give folks a little bit more time to get logged on and settled, and then we will start. It's great to see everyone. Okay, let's call that a quorum. We're going to go ahead and get started. So for those of you who are just joining us, happy Wednesday and welcome to today's Virtual Affairs Spring Kickoff webinar. We're really excited to have you here today. We've got a lot of great content to present. Before we get started though, let's do our standard round of housekeeping items. So first and foremost, we will be recording today's webinar. And anyone who registered for the webinar will receive a recording after the event. That email should go out tomorrow. So you'll see it in your inbox. And when I say anyone who registered, that means that if you have colleagues who registered but weren't able to attend today, they're still going to get a recording tomorrow. That recording will be shareable, so you can forward it to other colleagues. And we actually have a brand new page on our website that holds all information about upcoming and past webinars that we encourage you to check out. It'll have a recording for this webinar when it's ready. And actually, if my colleagues want to throw the webinar link into the chat, that'd be fabulous. Again, that's a really great hub to go to check out old recordings and see what new webinars are coming. I saw a question in the chat about how to ask questions during today's webinar. You should see a Q&A option on the Zoom panel. If you click in there, you'll be able to ask your question. And you can do that throughout the duration of today's webinar. You don't have to wait. We will have time at the end of the session for some open Q&A where we'll address some of the biggest questions that have been asked. But I also have a small contingent of friendly coworkers on the line who are going to be answering your questions throughout the presentation as well. So don't hesitate. Feel free to send it in, and we will answer as many as we can. On that note, I do want to call out, we have a lot of people on the webinar today, which is super exciting. That usually means, though, that we get a ton of questions. So everyone's going to be working really hard to answer your questions, but there's a possibility we won't get to everything live. So please know that we're doing our best. And if your question doesn't get answered, you can absolutely reach out to your relationship manager or our support team, and they will be more than happy to help you out. Finally, after the webinar, you're going to see a quick survey pop up asking you what you thought of today's presentation. We would love to have you fill it out. Let us know how we're doing. And that helps us kind of, iterate on content and approach in the future. So thank you so much for that. And I'll say it one more time just for good luck. We are recording today's webinar. It'll be sent to registrants tomorrow. All right, it's not just me talking at you today. I've got three wonderful colleagues to introduce who are going to be helping cover today's content. And let's have each of them say hi. So Joe, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Agaski from the support team, focusing mostly on our education and technical sides of support. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, and thanks for dropping by to spend an hour with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And next up, we've got Adelaide.
Hey everyone, Adelaide here from the Education Success Team. Really excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about how your relationship managers are going to be supporting you through this virtual fair season. Welcome, welcome.
Awesome. And then Jake.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm excited to be here and share some news about updates and features that we're launching this spring. So good to see you.
Wonderful. Okay, so here's our agenda for the day. Pretty simple. We're going to start off having Joe and Adelaide talk about how Handshake supports your fairs this spring. Then I'm going to take over and talk about updates that we released for virtual fairs this past fall. And I'll be showing a live product demonstration to illustrate that and covering a couple of best practices that we've gotten from our partners about using those updates as well. Then I'm going to hand it over to Jake to cover what's coming for spring fairs. And these are all updates that we're building right now and aiming to release in the next couple of weeks so that we get all of our updates in place before the busy fair season starts. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'll have time for Q&A at the end, but as always, feel free to send your questions in as they occur to you, and we will do our best to answer them. So before we get started, I wanted to do a quick poll. So let me launch this one. We've got 2 questions for you, and I'll share the responses from everyone once you're done voting. The first question is, did you host a virtual fair in Handshake last fall? Yes or no? And then the second question is, if you did host a virtual fair on Handshake last fall, what was the month of the last fair you hosted? And the reason I'm asking that is because the fall 2020 updates that we rolled out came out throughout the semester. And so, if you hosted a fair in September, there might have been new updates that came out in October that you want to know about. So we just want to get an idea of what the spread looks like. And we really appreciate you all sharing your insights on that. And there is a third question too. Back in December, we had a webinar to talk about our virtual fair benchmark report. That provided a ton of insight into data we collected over the course of the fall about how fairs were used and what engagement looked like to allow you all to assess the success of your own fairs against your peer groups. So we also sent out a report version of that webinar, as well as our campus career report, which looks at broader employer and student trends. So if you had a chance to check those out, definitely let us know. If you haven't yet, but plan to, let us know. And then if you don't think they'll be relevant, you can let us know that too. Awesome. So it looks like those people have voted. I'll give you all 10 more seconds. And then I will share the answers. Okay, here we go. So here's what the results look like. About 90% of folks on the line did host a fair in Handshake last fall. Looks like October was the most popular month for hosting. And we do have a good number of people who have checked out the reports and a lot more that are planning to check them out as well. If you are looking for them, if you happen to be on my newsletter listserv, I sent them out in last week's newsletter. And of course, if you still can't find the links, you can always reach out to your relationship manager. They will have them handy and happy to share them. Okay. Perfect. So thanks everyone for contributing. And with that, I am going to hand things over to Adelaide.
Thanks, Britt. So I am super excited to be the one to share the news that everyone has been waiting for, that has taken a lot of discussion, a lot of time, which is really to announce that virtual fairs are going to be free for all of your career-related programming for this spring and beyond. So I know a lot of you have been waiting to hear that sweet, sweet word, free, and Handshake is going to have virtual fairs continuing to be free in our product for all traditional career-related programming this spring and beyond. We all know that virtual is going to play a huge role in recruiting going forward. It's the way of the future. And really, in conversations that we've been having, we're hearing that employers are excited for a virtual fall. So many employers are not planning to go to in-person fairs this fall, and we want to continue to empower your team to be successful in this virtual environment. You'll also have the flexibility to host other creative career-related events on our virtual fair tool. So things like an industry night or a mock fair with employers where they're engaging with students using the virtual fair tool. We encourage you to be creative. We encourage you to consult with your relationship manager when you do have those creative ideas. And similar to what we've done in the past, if you want to use Handshake's virtual fair feature for other events that are not career related, so if you're thinking about using it for freshman orientation or a student activities fair, something that might be always on, like some kind of appointment feature, please reach out to your relationship manager before doing so. But your career-related programming will be free this spring, this fall, and in perpetuity. So definitely excited to see the comments in the chat, and feel free to rain confetti in the chat for that update about virtual fairs being free. Next slide, Britt. Okay, fantastic. So how will your relationship manager be supporting your fairs for this spring? All of you so far should have received communication from your relationship manager about getting set up for virtual fairs this spring. We're sending out lots of emails. We really want to work with you on getting your fairs set up. Prior to the fair, we're here to help you consult and to plan and to execute. So we can share some of the top questions that you might get in Zoom rooms when you're supporting your fair. We can review your fair before you launch it to help you craft your school's marketing plans and engagement goals. We can do lots of great consultations. So if you haven't responded to emails from my team yet, please go ahead and do so. And then on the actual day of the fair, to ensure that we can help all schools who are having fairs on that day, your relationship manager will be available to drop into your Zoom room. So all you need to do is let your relationship manager know the date and time of your fair so that they can plan to be on call. Just email them if you need them to drop into your Zoom room to answer a question with a student, answer a question with an employer, and they will be on call for that. For this spring and for the fall forthcoming, we do ask for your understanding that our relationship managers, they're an amazing team. They are serving many schools with simultaneous events, right? So they're not going to be staffed to your Zoom room for the entirety of your fair. They can drop in to answer questions, and then they're going to go back into standby mode so they can ping around and help many different schools at once. So again, host that Zoom room, let your relationship manager know the date and time of your fair so they'll be on call to drop in and help you, and then they'll drop back out, go into their standby mode so they can help lots of different schools at once. That's it for me. I'll pass it over to Joe.
Thanks so much, Adelaide. Let's move from working with your relationship manager to working with our fantastic support team here at Handshake during the virtual fair season. We will be around as well for all of your pre-fair questions. If you're running into issues with maybe network tests for students and employers when they go to test their network before the fair, or if you're running into scheduling issues with employers or students can't see the fair or can't sign up for the fair, reach out to us. We are more than happy to help with that. You can expect 24-hour responses for yourselves and also for your students and employers as we move through the spring fair season. We also have weekly office hours for both our education partners and our employer partners. Employers will be, I believe, on Wednesdays, and education partners will have webinars every Thursday, starting kind of today and tomorrow through the spring season. Our support team also available for scheduled calls for all of our education partners. If there are some more in-depth questions that you'd like to walk through, and maybe it's just easier to share your screen to explain exactly what's going on, more than happy to jump on a call with you. We can send out a link for you to use for yourself and the other partners in your office to schedule calls with our support team. Moving more into that day of in-the-minute support, best practice is often for your offices to set up some Zoom rooms to work with your students and employers when they're having those day of issues, 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe before their session starts. And we'll jump into some best practices for how to navigate those in just a minute. Also, the Help Center is fantastic. It's really been, it was really stocked up last fall for the fall season. Plenty of articles and resources for you to go in and help with those day of troubleshooting issues. And Britt, if we could jump over to the next slide here, we'd love to talk about some best practices for hosting Zoom rooms hosting Zoom rooms for your students and employers during your career fairs. The first thing I would want to remind all of you of is you have the ability to view as your students. When you have particular students are having issues, just pull up their account on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll see the View As button. From there, you'll be able to navigate the platform as they can to see where they might be running into some issues with the career fairs. But on a larger level, we think the best way to kind of handle your day of Zoom rooms with employers and students is to set up a couple Zoom rooms if you can, one for employers and one for students. And Sherry from Kennesaw State actually wrote a great blog post for how to staff a virtual fair, and hopefully we can share that in the chat in just a moment if we have that ready. Sherry walks through a lot of pre-fair steps, actually, ways to communicate with your students and employers, and we would absolutely recommend you take a look at those. But Sherry also breaks down how her staff handled the day of the fair. So Sherry's staff had her team split up into two groups, one for students, one for employers. They would have one staff member kind of monitoring and facilitating the Zoom rooms, sending students and employers into breakout rooms with the available staff members as necessary. But having those two rooms for employers and students throughout the fair was very critical to their success. And also opening them slightly before the fair. We actually tend to see the largest volume of questions about an hour before the fair when sessions become available to employers, and then students will pick up closer to the start time as well. But really, you can expect the most volume about an hour before the fair. I would also recommend you just take a look at Handshake's troubleshooting checklist. That tends to solve like 95% of technical issues that students and employers run into. And then always remember, if there is a technical issue that just can't be solved in time for a specific session, the employer always has the option to switch to an external link. Maybe they use Zoom or they use Google Meet regularly. They can just add a link to one of those directly in Handshake for students to see and jump into a platform that they know will work for them. Moving on finally here to some Handshake. Oh yes, go ahead, Britt.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in with a quick comment. I know that the title of this slide says best practices for hosting a Zoom room. Of course, if you are a Google or a WebEx shop, what we're really just referring to here is drop-in support rooms that schools have been offering to students and employers during the day of the fair. So these recommendations apply regardless of what video platform you're using to host those types of sessions. I just wanted to call that out. So it doesn't have to be a Zoom room. It could be, any kind of virtual room that you're offering your students.
Thanks, Britt. That's a fantastic call out. I get a little caught up with Zoom as that's what we're in day to day, but anything will work for you. Finally, want to go over just a few very important support documentation articles. I know we have a lot of articles in the Help Center, and there are a few up here and that we can link in the chat. Don't worry about remembering all of these today. If you get to one of these articles, we actually nest them very nicely inside of each other. So if you find any of these articles in the Help Center, as you walk through it, it'll link off to the relevant Help Center article for the next step in the process. Would love to call your attention particularly to our setup and preparation article. That's going to go through everything from how to initially set up your career fair to how to test it and make sure that you're aware of the workflows from both the employer and the student side, as well as to make sure that your career fair is working well. We also have a great day of management guide. That's a great resource for you to have open in a tab during your career fair. It'll walk through common issues that both students and employers face and steps you can take to fix those on the day of. We also have a couple articles walking over how to support employers and students from start to finish in the fair. That will walk you through everything from registering for the career fair to joining a session to any follow-up post-fair for your employers. And then lastly, another article I want to plug that Britt will touch on a little bit later, so I don't want to steal his thunder too much, but release notes, we had them last fall. We'll have them again in the spring. I had this open in a tab in my browser for about 3 months straight. One of the virtual fairs started last fall. It's a great way to stay on top of what's coming, but also what's recently been released on the virtual side. So that is a great article to keep open in your browser as we move through the spring. I'm going to turn it back over to Adelaide now to talk about possibly our best resource of all, our virtual fair launch kit.
Thanks, Joe. And I would call the Virtual Fair Launch Kit the best resource of all. It is the essential resource for all your planning, all your marketing needs. We heard during the fall that all the templates, the planning checklist, the training resources, the playbooks helped you host fairs that drove a ton of engagement, helped you troubleshoot with students, helped you troubleshoot with employers. So this spring, our marketing team has worked incredibly hard to provide a refreshed version of the Virtual Fair Launch Kit. So as you can see here, we have a new checklist, we have new training webinar recordings that reflect the virtual fair updates that were deployed throughout the fall. And we also have a new playbook for employers. One thing that we really took an eye to for the spring is creating guides that are even more time-based. So helping you plan your fair further in advance and saying what you need to do 8 to 10 weeks before, 4 weeks before, et cetera, to really help you nail the landing on your spring virtual fairs. Britt, next slide. And finally, office hours. Office hours were another huge hit in the fall. We heard from so many schools and so many employers how helpful these were. So we're bringing them back this spring. We're going to be hosting career services office hours weekly, and we'll also have separate weekly office hours for employers, which we've learned is completely critical to their success. Of course, still send specific troubleshooting questions to our support team. You can send your consultative and troubleshooting questions to your relationship manager as well, but know that office hours are really going to be that great place to do the upfront work to make sure that you understand the tool in and out and then can convey exactly how it works to your employers and to your students. That's it from me. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. And I know that we covered a lot of resources in that section. They're all really excellent. They should all be posted in the chat. And my colleagues can be on the lookout if folks didn't see something come through. So definitely review the chat. We'll make sure that these resources are put into the email that goes out to all registrants as well so that you can review them. But thanks so much to Joe and Adelaide for sharing all of those great resources. So now I'm going to take us through a highlight reel of virtual fair updates from last fall. And since these updates have rolled out, we've heard a lot of great best practices from schools about how they're using them. So I'm going to work on highlighting those along the way too. And if you have more best practices, I want to encourage you to come to office hours to share them. We are looking to incorporate more time into office hours for schools to talk to one another and share these tips and tricks, because we found that that was a really useful way to spend time in office hours in the fall. So definitely come with your best practices, share them with us. We want to share them back out to the world. So to show you the demo, I'm going to jump into the product. And we're going to start with the career services experience. Now, I'm going to show you a demo fair. So it's fake, dummy data. It is happening right now. Very exciting. So we'll get to see some of the features as they would appear to you during the fair itself. But I'm also going to talk through pre and post fair updates too. Now, setting up a virtual fair in Handshake is almost identical to setting up an in-person fair. The form is very much the same. You just have a couple of questions where you'll say that something is virtual as opposed to in person. Where things start to look a little bit different is when you are approving employer registrations. Now, because this is the day of the fair, I have a banner at the top of the screen that will take me directly to the fair to view sessions. So I'll click that, but first I actually want to show you the employer registration. So this is pre-fair, and as employer registration requests come in and you approve them, employers are going to start receiving prompts from Handshake to create their schedule. So this is where, again, where things start getting a little bit different. Employers are going to be asked to create the group and one-on-one sessions that they want to offer to your students. And then once that schedule is published, students can start signing up for their sessions. And this page that we're looking at, the registration page, gives you visibility into all of this pre-fair activity in one place. So in addition to monitoring things like their registration approval status and their payment status, you'll also be able to see which employers have created their schedules and how many students have signed up for them as well. So this is a great place to go in the days before the fair to kind of see how things are progressing. We've also made the leftmost columns here sticky. This is a recent update so that you can peruse all of this helpful information without losing track of which employer you're looking at. It's a pretty long table, so this really helps with readability. We've also added a small notification that lets you know if a registered employer hasn't yet been approved at your school. There aren't any of those here today, but as some of you might be aware, employers are able to request to register for your fair without being approved at your school. So we'll let you know if somebody has done that. That way you can potentially take them through the approval process if you would like. Now, when it comes to driving employer schedule creation, I want to call out that Handshake has deployed a ton of in-app and email prompts for employers, reminding them that they need to do that. So after they submit their registration, they're reminded. When it's approved, they're reminded. They get emails, they get in-app prompts to push them to do that. Now, our education partners have also shared that setting strict deadlines for schedule creation can be a really good way to drive employers to set up their schedules in time. And one of the pieces of messaging that works best on that front is to say that unless you have a schedule created and published, students will not be able to sign up for sessions with you. So it's really critical to get that done and ideally get it done before students are even in the system signing up. Our partners also shared that for the truant employers, the stragglers, jumping on the phone can be the best way to get them to take action. So this is your hub for pre-fair insights. And then during the fair itself, you'll want to jump over to the session details page, which again, you can access using that banner at the top of the screen on the dashboard, or by clicking on the view session details page once you are looking at the fair itself. The session details page is your command center for monitoring activity during the fair. There are a lot of really cool actions that you can take and monitoring that you can do from this page. So first of all, this page shows sessions that are occurring chronologically. So you can see what the entire day is going to look like in order. It also lets you see which sessions are in progress using this in progress tab, or you can also use the filter on the left here to see all of them pulled up at once. If a session is being hosted externally, so not using Handshake video, but perhaps the employer in question wants to use Zoom to host their group session, you'll see this little link icon, which actually contains the link to that session itself. So you could grab it if you want to join the session, you could grab it if a student is looking for the link. It's easily accessible to you right there to copy. Another great aspect of this page is that you can see no-shows, both students and employers. So this is a great way during the fair to keep tabs on what's happening in individual sessions and take action if needed. In fact, our friends at the University of New Hampshire noted that they staffed a person as a no-show monitor during their fair. And that person would reach out to employer no-shows to see if they needed help connecting to Handshake. And offer any last-minute troubleshooting tips. So that's a great way to use this feature as well. Now let's talk about after the fair. So after the fair is over, we've got a ton of great reporting options to help you show how successful your fair was. And one of the best assets at your disposal are the pre-built report templates that we've created for virtual fairs. There are 17 of them. And these pre-built virtual fair report templates have the relevant filters and fields already added. So you can use them as a way to, have a report out of the box, or if you want to do a more detailed analysis, you can use them as a jumping off point and add your own additional filters or fields. So I've got them pulled up here. When you're looking at the analytics tab, if you filter for community and career fairs, you'll see all of the pre-built reports that Handshake has vetted and published for everyone to use. And you'll be able to, again, apply them to your own individual fairs. One new statistic that we found to be especially meaningful is the total number of student-employer connections facilitated by a fair. This is a number that you would likely have to have guessed at for in-person fairs because it's really hard to quantify how many times an employer met with a student. But in a virtual context, it's actually super easy. And you may have heard, if you joined our benchmark webinar, that we facilitated over 1 million connections in virtual fairs this fall, which is a really incredible and exciting number. You can see that number for your individual fairs using the total student sessions report, which is, where did it go? Total student sessions, here it is. Now, looking at best practices from other schools, Michigan State shared that they also looked at the total number of one-on-ones that students had and the average number of one-on-one sessions per student as key indicators of virtual fair success. So to start analyzing those types of metrics, you could take a look at the one-on-one and group session activity during virtual fairs, or you could dive into this report, the one-on-one sessions report. These are both great ones to help get you started on that type of analysis. And we actually have a Help Center article that links to all of these different reports for quick and easy access. One of my colleagues should be able to grab that and throw it in the chat. But we highly recommend using these. Again, they are vetted by Handshake, and you can apply your own additional filters and fields to them if you want, but they're also ready to go out of the box and a great way to highlight the success of your fairs. So now let's switch over to the employer experience and talk about some updates on that front. Give me a second here. Now, again, for employers, they will also get a banner at the top of the page letting them know that they have a fair that's happening today with a quick link to take them directly there. And let's talk about the updates that came out for employers. A lot of the updates focused on making the scheduling process even more streamlined and flexible. So after a schedule has been published, employers now have a lot more options to tweak that schedule to better fit their own personal schedule and to react to student engagement trends that they're seeing ahead of the fair. The Manage Sessions dropdown over here on the right gives you an array of options for editing your schedule after it's live, and you can even make these edits during the fair as long as the session you're editing hasn't started yet. And Jake's going to cover in a couple of minutes a few additional editing options that we're going to be adding to this menu in the next couple of weeks. Now, one scheduling best practice from this fall was that qualifications like major or GPA restrictions that employers can set on their one-on-one sessions should be used sparingly. Removing one-on-one qualifications or editing them, which is available in the Manage Sessions menu, is a good way to fill more slots if an employer isn't seeing as much activity as they would like. We actually productized that insight that removing qualifications helps drive more students to sign up for your sessions. And it's another important update to be aware of. So when an employer is creating their schedule, if they choose to set one-on-one qualifications, we now automatically remove those qualifications 48 hours before the fair. And the employer is notified about this when they're setting up their schedule, and they have the option to opt out if they want to, so that their qualifications would be maintained all the way up to the fair. But we highly recommend they stick with removing qualifications ahead of time. And again, this is really about ensuring that they get to meet with a lot of students and they're not overly reliant on what they think the perfect student looks like. And you can think of this setup of removing qualifications 48 hours before the fair as similar to a pre-select to open interview schedule. So the employer sets qualifications to give a specific subset of relevant students early access to their slots. And then after a certain set period of time, all other students are allowed to grab up the additional slots as well. Now, when an individual rep who's attending the fair logs into Handshake, they'll have access to their own schedule. And before the fair, they'll have option to test out their video. So by clicking this button, they're essentially able to launch a fake group session that lets them make sure that audio, visual, screen sharing is all working as expected. They can also invite coworkers to join the session as well so that they can have multiple people check things out ahead of time. This test video button is also available for career services ahead of time if you want to check it out. On the day of the fair, if they're looking at their schedule, it will automatically update in real time and show a notification if a student cancels on a slot that they had signed up for, or if a student signs up for a slot last minute. The idea being that if you're looking at this page and something happens in the moment, you want to be made aware of it. So those notifications help you keep tabs on students signing up on the day of or canceling in real time. It should also be noted that once they're in a session, employers and students get a 1-minute warning to ensure that they have enough time to wrap up their conversations and head to the next meeting. Now, finally, knowing that facilitating student-employer connections is the most important outcome of a fair, we released a new hub that employers can use to keep track of the students they met with, learn more about them, and follow up with them. And it's called the RSVPs tab right here. Starting as soon as the employer's schedule is posted, they'll be able to see students who have signed up for their fair session. So that means before the fair, during the fair, after the fair, any student who has signed up for their sessions will show up here. This allows them to review the students' profiles, review their resume if the student has a public resume, and send them messages as well. So the page is really meant to push employers to engage with students who sign up to meet with them and keep track of them after the fair is over. So you can see the full list here, as well as a lot of different helpful filters over on the left that let them kind of sort through who's signed up and take action from there as well. Okay, now finally, let's take a look at the student experience. So I'll switch over to viewing as a student. Now, while I'm going to be showing the student experience on the web today, it's important to note that students can also participate in virtual fairs on our iOS and Android apps. They can view and sign up for sessions, they can join video sessions, and they can engage with employers after the fair, all through mobile as well. It's all available there. So that's a great thing for students to know, great way to make it a more flexible experience for them. Now, students who have signed up for sessions or who've registered for the fair will also get a banner at the top of their screen that takes them directly to the fair. And this will show them their schedule. Now, I want to jump over to the available sessions tab to talk about scheduling ahead of the fair. So in the lead up to the fair, we've made it easier for students to find the right employers because available sessions are now ranked by their relevance to the student. So that way, when a student clicks into the fair, they don't have to scroll endlessly to find what they're looking for. The best results will be shown at the top of the page so that it's immediately visible to them. If an employer has registered for the fair but hasn't yet published their schedule, we'll show the student a prompt to follow that employer. And if they do follow the employer, we'll send them a notification via email once the schedule is posted. So it's a great way to stay on top of an employer's activity if they haven't yet published their schedule. Now, following an employer also means that in the future, the student will get notified when the employer posts new jobs or events. So it's a great way to not only stay on top of what the employer is doing with respect to the fair, but also moving forward, keeping tabs on their activity so that you can go to future events or apply for future jobs that they might post. And in fact, this prompt to follow employers, along with another prompt that we surface to students after a session with an employer, has led to a 12x increase in employer follows among fairgoers compared to students who don't attend the fair. So because these prompts to follow employers are highly relevant, we see a huge increase in activity and following. So it's a great action for you to promote to your students because they're going to see it brought up so many times in the fair experience. Now, students can sign up for sessions before and during the fair. So you can see here, for sessions that haven't started yet, I'm able to go in and sign up for them. Excuse me. So We've also released an update that allows a student to sign up for a group session after it has started. So they can sign up and join late if they want. And this allows for even more flexibility and serendipity in the fair experience. Once the student is in a session, they now have a slew of new enhancements to make the sessions more dynamic. So in a large group session, students will be able to raise their hand to request to be unmuted by the host. And students can also share their screen to display projects or resumes or websites when talking to a recruiter. And these enhancements collectively lend themselves to different session structures. So when employers are thinking about how they might want to structure their sessions or staff them, the ability for students to join a group session late and the raise hand functionality allow for more informal Ask Me Anything style forums where a student can stop by to ask their questions. And updates like screen sharing mean that students in a one-on-one session have the ability to showcase their work more dynamically when talking with a recruiter by displaying a website that they've created or a project that they worked on, or even just their resume. So jumping back into today's presentation, I wanted to say that I know that was a lot of information. We released a lot of great updates. And to be honest, there are other great updates that we won't even have time to review today. But that said, there's good news. They are all documented. Some of you may be familiar with my release notes, which Joe mentioned earlier. Every single virtual fair update that we launched is documented in a Help Center article for quick reference. I updated them daily, religiously through the fall, just for you. So you should definitely check them out. We can throw the link in the chat. I also wrote a blog post that highlights the bigger updates and how they positively impact you, your students, and your employers. So if you want something that's a little bit less granular, but still talks about the big updates from the fall, check out that blog post. They'll both be in the chat. Now, when it comes to staying on top of releases this spring, we're going to continue this high level of visibility so that you can understand what new enhancements are coming and factor them into how you run your fair. So keep referring to release notes. I'm going to be updating them within the next few days to cover all of the updates that we talk about today. You should also absolutely attend office hours, which Adelaide talked about earlier. We'll cover any recently released updates and how you can use them in office hours. And then finally, make sure you review my biweekly newsletter. That's where I detail new and upcoming feature releases, not just for virtual fairs, but for all Handshake features. If you don't currently get the newsletter, you just need to add the Handshake point of contact permission to your account. And we have a Help Center article that can tell you how to do that will drop into the chat. For those of you who are subscribed to the newsletter, I hope you found it really helpful. I really love writing them every other week. So it's a great way to stay on top of everything that's happening at Handshake, including virtual fair updates. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jake.
Thanks, Britt. Thanks for doing an exhaustive demo there. It's nice to look at it in real time and not just look at slides. I think it helps make things a little bit more real for folks. So appreciate you running through that. And we're going to walk through some updates we're making for spring 2021. So a lot of these Britt just exhibited, frankly, but we'll talk through kind of the exhaustive list of changes made from the fall to the spring, so you're aware of what that looks like. We are planning to get all these updates out before the busy spring fair season. We know that's starting to kick off in 3 to 4 weeks from now. We avoided changing a ton of really structural things ahead of spring, mainly because we didn't want features being added in real time mid-season. We know last fall was a little bit hectic for everyone as we were building this new thing and getting it out the door and having folks jump in. So we want to avoid that, make things a little bit more stable this spring. And we're going to continue keeping track of feedback. We have office hours. We actually have a mini advisory group related to events and fairs specifically. And so we meet with them regularly to talk through a lot of feedback. So continue sharing your thoughts and feedback with us over the next few weeks and months. So the first theme was really around making it easier for students to find sessions that are relevant to them. Britt mentioned that we are now ranking session recommendations and employer recommendations based on relevance, which is great so that students don't have to scroll. But to quickly run through what more granular updates we made ahead of this spring. So students are now able to filter sessions by each 10-minute increment. So they have a little bit more granularity as to being able to create their schedule in those 10-minute chunks. They're able to see which employers have open one-on-ones and the number of one-on-ones that are open for those employers. They can follow registered employers who have yet to set up a schedule. We know there are instances where that may be the case. And now they will receive an email notification when that employer creates that schedule so that they can come in and grab a slot. So that, little bit of sequencing issue that we've seen in the past, hopefully will get resolved. And now another big update is that students are able to join group sessions after they've started. So this is sign up for and join, right? So if you had already registered for a group session, you could show up a couple minutes late, that was fine. Now we're not locking that session at the moment it starts for any new signups. So if there's still space, again, there's a 50-person limit for group sessions hosted in Handshake, but if there's still slots available, students can join at any time. We're also adding a little bit more clear language to students there looks like a typo there, but if registration has not yet opened. So if a student comes in to the fair and the registration is not available, we're making that a little bit more clear to students. They know what to do. So the next update is around making sure that we're recommending fairs to employers. We know it's a lot of work on your end to find sets of employers that may be relevant for your students, doing that every season. So we added a couple new fields to the fair creation form. You may have seen this already. We're asking for an estimate for both employer and student registrations, a number, how many employers and how many students you expect to come, and an industry focus for the fair. We will use those figures to help recommend and promote fairs to employers that may be interested in it. So help you find, new employers to join. So your RMs will also work closely with you if you feel like there's you're a little low on student registrations, or we're getting up to the time of the fair. It's a good way to just get a sense of how we can increase registrations on both sides. Next, making employer session management a bit easier. We know this is a big theme, big set of feedback that we heard in the fall. So we want to make it easy for employers to assign representatives more seamlessly and have those representatives set up sessions more easily. So we reorganized that page. Britt showed some of that earlier. We'll be adding essentially two new options. So one is adding a new teammate to the manage team dropdown. So you can create a new teammate representative essentially from that page. And you'll also be able to add a new one-on-one session within that same dropdown. So it's all centralized in one place, and should reduce burden on the employers who have had to do a lot of extra clicks, and certainly on career services as well, helping those employers get the schedule set up. The next big theme we focused on ahead of spring was helping students connect with employers and letting those students put their best foot forward. So we are prompting students to upload their resumes and update their profile visibility a bit more prominently as they enter the fair and as they register for the fair. This will give employers a much better holistic view of students' backgrounds. They'll be able to have that resume on hand for those one-on-ones, help guide that conversation and make that 10-minute session a lot richer. We've heard this feedback from employers, especially looking to get access to that information ahead of time so they can help craft the discussion and make it a little bit more meaningful and personal with those students. And a reminder, we're not changing the permissions or any privacy settings around resume visibility. So this is not exposing student resumes to employers in any different fashion than we have in the past. Employers can only see resumes, only public resumes for students who have signed up for one of their sessions. So that's still the case. It's just getting more of those uploaded so employers have access earlier ahead of the fair. Next is making sure that you and your employer partners have access to information really easily. We know, hearing from Joe and Adelaide earlier that we're here as a support for you, but we don't necessarily need to be a support for you at all times. And there's a lot of things that you can help yourself with and find in the application. So we added a search field, and this is live today, a search field for our help center live in the application. So you don't need to go out to our help center and try to find the right article there. You can just click help, type in your search term, and it should recommend different articles that relate to what you're searching. And that should help very quickly find some key answers that our help center should provide. We're also updating, as Britt demoed, the registration page with just better navigation and legibility, so you're able to kind of get a sense of what's happening. And we're also adding a bunch of new saved report templates. I think we have a couple dozen in there now specifically for career fairs. We have many dozen across different topics, and more are being developed all the time. And a reminder that you can develop those even ahead of time and share those saved reports with other members in your school. So, you don't have to repeat the work with your colleagues as well. So you can save those off and customize them however you need. So that should hopefully make things a little bit easier. So those are pretty much the breadth of the updates we're making for this spring. As I mentioned, we didn't want to change any major structural things and have folks confused during the spring season. All those updates will be live by early February before the fair season starts. As I mentioned earlier, we have our Events and Fairs Advisory Board we're meeting with regularly. So we're tracking a lot of this feedback, and I encourage you to reach out to relationship managers and send in support tickets as needed, and also give us that feedback. At the end of this semester, so as fair season kind of comes to a close in April, very early May, we are going to be putting together a new updated virtual fair benchmark report. So in December, we shared a benchmark report for the fall season. We'll be updating that, and because it was a benchmark report, we'll be showing changes. How have sentiment changes occurred between the seasons? How has adoption changed, participation, et cetera? Give us a much clearer picture as the world evolves over the next few months. We'll get a sense of what the fall should look like in terms of in-person, virtual, hybrid, and both how the Handshake product is going to support that, but also hearing a lot from you on what you're planning in your employer partnerships and your fall plans. And we should also, in concert with that, be able to give you a better sense of what we're planning for the fall updates after the season, after a lot of this feedback comes in. So really excited and looking forward to working with everyone over the next few months. And with that, I think we have another quick poll just to get a sense of any feedback on that.
Yes, you thought you were done hearing from me, but I'm back again with one more poll. So let me get that launched. And this is just a simple question. Do you plan to host a virtual fair on Handshake this spring? Just want to get a sense again for everyone who's attending. Are you hosting? Are you thinking about hosting? So please do let us know. We've got a couple of options there, including you might say, no, we're not hosting any virtual fairs this spring if that's just not on your docket. Awesome. Thanks everyone so much for answering here. We really appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to give another 10 seconds and then I'll show you all the results. Actually, we can let it go for a little bit longer. So please, if you haven't gotten a chance to do so yet, go ahead and respond. Okay, perfect. So here are the results. 80% of folks on the line today said that they are hosting a virtual fair in Handshake and it's already created. And then we've got a couple who are still deciding or are going to create the fair later. That's super helpful. We really appreciate you sharing that information with us. And hopefully you learned a lot of good stuff today that'll help inform your strategy for pulling off those fairs this spring. We know you'll do excellent. All righty, so with that, we've got a little bit more time left in today's session to answer some questions. Thanks to everyone who has submitted questions. I wanted to call out, there might be some questions that we haven't been able to get to or answer as thoroughly as is needed. So we highly recommend, if your question doesn't get answered today, check out the Help Center, come to office hours, reach out to support or your relationship manager. We've got a lot of different channels to help get those questions answered. For now, let's talk about a couple of the most common questions we saw today. And I'm going to start with this one. It's an excellent one. If an employer is using an external source like Zoom for their video meetings, might they show up as a no-show on the session details if they are in a Zoom room? This is a great question. So just to give a little bit of background here, if an employer wants to host their sessions, their video sessions on Handshake, that is, kind of one of the key features that we have available for them. But in some cases, employers are going to be required to use an external platform that's been approved like Zoom or Google Hangouts. And they are able to drop the link for a session into Handshake so that students can still go into Handshake to sign up for sessions and manage their schedule. But when they click to join the session, they'll just be taken to that external meeting session. Now, because the employer is likely going to join that session directly from Zoom or WebEx or Google, whatever they're using, they are very likely to show up as a no-show on the session details page. So it's good to keep that in mind. Let me actually show you what to do. So if you'll recall, when I was showing you the session details page, you will see this little link icon if the session is being hosted externally. So if you see that icon, it's likely that you'll see the host is listed as a no-show. You probably don't have to worry because the host likely just joined from the external platform directly. If you wanted to check, you could copy the link and join the session yourself because it is available to you right there. So that's a great question, and hopefully that helps clarify. Okay, we got another great question. And this one is it even possible for a single person career center to run one of these? Adelaide, I'd love to have you jump in and maybe speak to this. I know that one of the main pieces of feedback we've heard from schools who have hosted these is that the actual administration aspect of running these fairs is a lot easier. So it does take less people to pull them off. Any insights you can share on a one-person office?
Yeah, absolutely, Britt. I have talked to a few different schools who were able to successfully run a virtual career fair with a single person career center. It really comes down to the planning and preparing in advance, setting up your fair as soon as possible and making sure to monitor employer registrations so that you can help them get their schedules set up and make sure that they understand how the tool works far in advance. And then if you have the ability to loop in any students, if you have any graduate assistants who can help you, that always is, of course, super helpful. But if you're a one-person office, it's entirely possible to host this fair fair. You'll just want to make sure that you're doing this in advance.
Awesome. Fabulous answer, Adelaide. Okay, we've got time for one more question. So we had a question come in. When students are viewing the employers with available sessions, how is it filtered to show the most relevant? Is it based on major groups or something else? And Jake, I might tag you in to help with this. The way that we recommend employers is in virtual affairs is the same way that we recommend employers and jobs in the product itself. So it is going to be based on the student's major, but it's also going to be based on things like their career interests, any activity that they have done in Handshake, you know, whether they've applied for jobs, attended other events in the past. So it is really the whole kind of like complex recommendation algorithm that exists in Handshake that will be used to help determine which employers are most relevant to the student in question. Jake, anything to add to that?
Yeah, we're looking at essentially which jobs are posted by those employers, what industry those employers are in, the majors of students, and any indication of preferences that those students have made in their profile. So it's similar to the job recommendations algorithm that's, you know, recommending certain jobs on the jobs page for students. Similar to that in terms of making matches. It will also improve over time as we learn more.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. And with that, we are at time. Again, please stick around. We have a quick, like 2-question survey for you to fill out about how you like today's webinar. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us, including a recording of this webinar and some of the resources we shared today. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Hope you found this really helpful. We have another encore session with the exact same content next week. If any of your colleagues missed it and want to come live, definitely send them our way. And can't wait to see you again in a future meeting. Thanks so much, everyone.